Hello again. It is I, Ultra of Taro Productions, and once again, it is Spooktober Storytime. Tonight's story is one read by yours truly. The story in question is Step Closer, and so, without further ado, let us begin. Foxy's yellow eyes glowed in the darkness of the room. His jaw hung open, flashing sharp teeth. Foxy lifted his hook and slashed its sharp tip in front of Pete's face, the hook whizzing by his nose. Pete rolled off the bed, his body shaking. His stomach pitched as he lay helplessly on the floor, and Foxy pivoted, looming over him. The shifting of gears filled the room as Foxy swung up with his hook.
You moving on to become a real pirate. You must lose your eye and an arm.
No, Pete breathed. When Foxy slammed his hook down into Pete's eye, an audible pop sounded, and blood poured from his eye socket as Pete screamed. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was crowded with crazy little kids and their harassed idiot parents. Music bellowed through the wall speakers, and arcade games pinged and vibrated. The scent of burnt pepperoni wafted through the air, mixed with the scent of cotton candy. Pete was slouched against a wall, ankles crossed and ball cap turned backwards, drinking a cherry-flavored cola while chewing watermelon gum. His little brother and his friends were crowded around an arcade game. Pete didn't want to be there, but his mother had to work and Chuck had to be with his friends after school, so that left Pete to play babysitter for the 100th time. He asked himself, why was it always his job? And was the little snot grateful? Nope. Chuck was always whining about his inhaler. Always whining he was hungry. Always asking a bunch of questions. Always something. Since their dad left, Pete was saddled with everything with Chuck. His mom's words were stuck in his head. You're the man of the house now, Pete. Take care of your little brother. How was Pete supposed to know? How was Pete supposed to be the man when he was just 16? Did anyone ask him what he thought of his new responsibilities? Double nope. Pete watched a little kid walk up to a couple of employees cleaning the birthday tables. He pulled on a guy's sleeve. The man looked down at the kid and smiled. Can I help you with something? I was wondering about Foxy the pirate. Where is he? The kid asked. The man's voice was syrupy sweet. Oh, Foxy's on vacation at the moment. We hope to have him back soon. The kid stuck his lip out as he walked away, nodding. The other employee chuckled. Good one, he told the man. On vacation in the maintenance room. Don't know when they'll bring the show out again. Pete was thinking that over when he realized someone was saying his name. Pete? He pulled his attention from the conversation and moved his gaze towards Maria Rodriguez, who was standing beside him. Her black hair brushed her shoulders and her lips were glossy red. She had these bright green eyes with long lashes and a few freckles on her nose. She was a cheerleader at their high school, and he'd known her since the 6th grade. So why did he suddenly feel so nervous around her? Hey, Maria, he said. Stuck with little Chucky, huh? Pete scowled. Yeah. Same here. My little sister's birthday. Maria motioned to a birthday cake in front of the stage, with little kids wearing cone hats and eating cake. Can't believe we used to be like them. He smirked. Don't know about you, but I was never like that. Maria smiled. Sure. So, where you been? Haven't seen you at practice lately. He'd been benched from the football team for an unnecessary roughness and having a bad attitude on multiple occasions. Hello, this was football, so so he just quit altogether? The truth was, Pete never used to quit anything. He used to finish whatever he started, but after seeing his parents quit each other, finishing things didn't matter anymore. Plus, he didn't need any more grief from the coach. He got enough of that from his teachers and his mom. A kid could only handle so much griping. He shrugged. Got tired of it all, you know? Yeah. So, what are you gonna do with all your free time now? Well, someone waved to Maria from the party table, and her face lit up. Yes! Finally! Time to leave! Before she left, she added, "Hey, a bunch of us are meeting under the old beacon bridge if you want to come hang out later." Pete smiled. Yeah? She nodded. It'll be fun. Then he shook his head. Can't. I have to watch Chuck the Chump. Okay. Maybe next time? See you around. Irritation washed over Pete as he watched Maria walk away. This was all Chuck's fault. Little brat. Everything was always about his little brother. Didn't matter what Pete wanted because nothing mattered when it came to Pete. Dad had left. Mom was in her own little world. They figured they'd just put Pete in charge of Chuck because they didn't have time to deal with him themselves. But Pete had never signed up to take over their responsibilities. He was a kid, and kids should be free. Not worrying about stuff. They should be able to do whatever they wanted, like hang out with other kids instead of watching their little brothers. But his parents didn't care about any of that, obviously. After all, they never asked Pete if he had wanted them to split up in the first place. They just divorced. And that was that. None of it was fair. Pete had so many emotions inside of him that sometimes he just didn't know what to do with them. Sometimes he felt like a ticking time bomb about to explode. Like the tension in his body was just under his skin, begging for release. For a while, football had helped. He'd been a beast on the field, taking down players, throwing people out of the way. By the end of practice, he'd been exhausted and empty. Empty was better. It was good. But since he was off the team, Pete was stuck without an outlet. He hated these feelings. He hated everything sometimes. He watched his little brother break off from his friends and head to the bathroom, and his eyes narrowed on the fresh opportunity. Pete tossed his soda at an empty table and walked quickly to his brother, latching onto his arm forcefully. Chuck's face screwed up. Ow! Pete! Shut up and walk, he muttered, and then blew a bubble till it popped. Why? Where are we going? You'll see. With a quick look over his shoulders, Pete hustled his little brother down a long, darkened corridor. The floor was faded and old, and peeling posters of the animatronics lined the walls. The place was in need of a serious upgrade. Pete had wandered down there before and discovered the large maintenance room. Now that he knew what was taking a vacation inside, he couldn't wait to take Chuck along for a little adventure. Considering his brother had always been scared of a certain animatronic. Chuck started to protest. Where are we going? What's the matter? You scared? No! I just want to be with my friends! We're gonna go check something out. Chuck hiccuped and licked his dry lips around his braces. He sounded like a toad when he was nervous. Just leave me alone, or I'm telling Mom! You're such a little snitch. Now you're really going in. Pete dragged his surprisingly strong little brother through the entrance of the maintenance room to meet Foxy the pirate. The heavy door slammed behind them, engulfing them in darkness. Pete! Let me go! Quiet! Someone might hear, and I don't want to listen to you whining like a baby. Do you know how annoying that is? Pete wouldn't let loose of the vice grip he had on his brother. No, it was time to teach Chuck a lesson. It was time for Pete to do what he wanted, and right now. Now, that meant giving his brother a good scare. Little Chuck the chump might even pee his pants. Pete chuckled at the idea, and with one hand still firmly on his brother's arm, he fished the phone out of his pocket and turned on the light to guide them slowly through the darkness. The area was strangely quiet, as if it wasn't connected to a boatload of people just down a hallway. The smell here was stagnant and musty. The air seemed lifeless, as if no one had set foot in the place recently, which was weird when the rest of the building was so full of activity. Pete's foot knocked a bottle across the floor. It hit something and shattered. Pete and Chuck froze, wondering if someone would hear, but no one seemed to be around. Pete scanned the floor with the light, revealing scuffed black and white checkered tiles. Dusty tables and a few broken chairs were scattered around the large room. There were cardboard boxes on the table, half-empty glasses with party hats and plates scattered around them. His light flashed on a big black spider sitting on the edge of one of the boxes. "Oh, look at that sucker! He's huge!" Pete said. The spider jumped away and the boys leaped back. "I hate spiders! Let's get out of here!" Chuck whined again. "Not yet. There's so much more to explore. Think of it like one of those adventure games you like to play. We have to find the secret treasure." Pete said, laughing under his breath. More like he had to scare the crap out of his brother a little more. He flashed the light back down to the floor. He stopped at what looked like dark melted candles and strange black markings. What are those symbols? What is that?" Chuck wanted to know. "Who cares?" Pete continued to wave the light around, and then he saw a small stage with the closed purple curtain, and a grin split his mouth. Pinned to the curtain was a crooked sign that said, "Out of service." Score. Hopefully it still works. "Pete, we shouldn't be here. We could get in trouble, like big trouble, like trespassing, you know? That's against the law. It's against the law." Pete mimicked in a tiny voice. "You're such a nerd, you know that? What are you gonna be when you grow up, Chuck? A cop? I'll be sure to buy you a donut on the way home." Pete shined a light to the stage, revealing a rusted control box on the side. The cover was broken off of the box. "This is gonna be so good." He dragged his brother to the foot of the stage. "Enjoy the show, little bro." "Stop it, Pete!" He grabbed Chuck by the shirt and pants, giving him a good wedgie as he launched him onto the little stage. Chuck crashed down onto the platform with a "Ugh!" and Pete rushed to the control box. He slammed a palm onto the button that said "Start." Again and again. A low hum sounded, followed by a muffled clink and clank. "Oh, come on!" Pete yelled when nothing happened. Finally, small curtains began to... In a quick motion, Chuck rolled to the side. "Chuck, you wimp!" Pete rushed to the stage, grabbing Chuck by his sneakers to keep him there. In quick moves only fear can bring on, Chuck managed to evade his brother. He climbed to his feet, jumped off the platform, and ran. That was the fastest Pete had ever seen his brother run. If he hadn't been running from Pete, he might have even been impressed. Pete moved to get him back, then came to a halt in front of the stage, as his shirt caught on something. "Dang!" he muttered, and tugged on his shirt, but it was caught on a stupid nail. Choppy music sounded through the air as the curtains opened fully. Pete stood frozen in front of a fractured, foxy animatronic that was glaring down at him. Yellow eyes glowed under the red brows, and an eye patch flipped up over its right eye. A jaw with sharp, pointy teeth hung loosely as the big fox began to sing a disjointed song about becoming a pirate. One arm had a hook for a hand, and the other was stripped of fur, showing its robotic skeleton. Strange sounds of whirring gears screeched and seemed to echo through the quiet of the room. The robot's chest appeared to be ripped open, exposing more of its mechanical body. Foxy moved slowly, eerily. Even though Pete knew he was a robot, his deteriorated body looked to be half eaten away by who knows what. A shiver skittered down Pete's spine. He swallowed his gum. He couldn't move. He couldn't move his gaze away from Foxy's yellow eyes as he sang.
Yeah, you can be a pirate. Push you at the moves and I am an arm. Push you at the moves and I am an arm. Push you at the moves and I am an arm. Push you at the moves and I am an arm.
The old animatronic was stuck singing the same lyric over and over again.
Push you at the moves and I am an arm.
Pete blinked as a strange feeling came over him. Like an invisible, cold, heavy blanket was covering every inch of his body, then sinking through his skin, into his bones.
Push you at the moves and I am an arm.
The room grew still with sudden silence, yet Pete remained standing there in the dark, unmoving. He blinked and looked around, trying to remember where he was. He was in the dark, alone. His pulse scrambled as he stepped back. Then he saw his shirt was caught on a nail, and then it all came back to him. He rubbed his eyes, yanked his shirt off the nail, and stormed away from the stage to find his brother. Damn it, Chuck! Pete watched Chuck suck in a puff of his inhaler before he sat down at the dinner table. He couldn't tell his little brother's nerves were still shot from when Pete took him to see Foxy the pirate. Chuck eyed Pete across the table and squirmed. Pete didn't know he was so upset about it. The little brat didn't even get to see the best part of the show. He'd run away and stuck closely to his friends until it was time to come home. How was Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, boys? Their mom asked as she set plates of ham and potatoes in front of them. Fine, Chuck said, without looking up from his plate. Yeah, just dandy, Pete muttered, swallowing mashed potatoes. What? Did something happen? No, nothing, the brothers said together. Pete gave Chuck a warning look. Better not tell. Mom raised her eyebrows as she sat down. Okay, well, I have some exciting news to share with you both. I thought it was time for us to do something as a family. And something that was good for the world. Pete bit back words that would likely hurt his mom's feelings. What family? It had been nearly 6 months since Dad had left and broken up their family. And when had she become a do-gooder? Something new. Something that represents a fresh start for the three of us as a family unit. Something that could get... She pulled out a paper from a folder and turned it towards them. Pete read the bold letters in disbelief. Organ donors? Mom nodded in excitement. Yes, we'll be family donors. Doesn't that sound great? Chuck's gaze met Pete in astonishment. This is your exciting news. You really want us to give up our body parts? She waved her hand at Pete. Only if something happens to us, silly, which we obviously don't want. But if it did, we could actually help other people who are sick and in need of a new heart or kidney. We could save someone's life. We'd be heroes. We'd be dead heroes, Chuck said. She laughed. Oh, Chuckles, you make me laugh. Yeah, Chuckles, you're a riot, Pete said, deadpan. Chuck scrunched up his face. Hey, Mom, you know what Pete did at the pizza place? Pete narrowed his eyes at Chuck. He knew the little brat couldn't keep his mouth shut. What did he do? He drank way too much soda, Chuck smiled, flashing his railroad tracks. Mom sighed. Pete, come on. told you what all that soda does to you. Pete just looked back at his mom. What was with her lately? Last month, she'd started to see someone who called herself a life coach. Then Mom had started yoga, chopped her long hair off, and gone on some weird juice cleanse. She also gathered a bunch of their stuff and given it away to charity. Now, she wants them to donate their body parts. Here, read the flyer, Pete, Mom said. It'll convince you for sure. Pete grabbed the paper his mom shoved under his nose. The list of organ donations was pretty long. Bones, heart, kidney, liver, pancreas, skin, intestines, eyeballs. You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm, yar! Pete flashed back to Foxy. He imagined Foxy suddenly walking off the stage and stalking towards him with his big, sharp hook, his mechanical feet scraping across the floor. Pete's mashed potatoes did a slow roll in his stomach, and he suddenly felt lightheaded. He blinked the image away. What a dumb idea, Mom. Pete, it's not dumb. It hurts my feelings that you think that. Yeah, Mom was into expressing her feelings lately, too. He shoved his chair away from the table and stood up as his face flashed cold, then hot. I'm not doing it, Mom. Pete, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to bed. Pete walked out of the dining room. What happened? He hears his mom ask. Chuck sighed. Puberty. Hurry up, Pete! The next morning, Chuck banged on the bathroom door. If Pete didn't get out soon, Chuck would be late for the bus to W.H. Jameson Middle School. If he missed the bus, then he'd have to ride his bike 5 miles to school, and his mom would freak out over him going alone. She was paranoid something would happen if Pete wasn't with him, which she didn't understand since he was almost 12, well, 11 and a half. Lots of his friends were left by themselves all the time, but not Chuck. Pete always said it was because Chuck was the baby and their mom couldn't stop thinking of him that way. He heard Pete heave into the toilet and Chuck stepped back and cringed. Pete was sick, he figured. Chuck's lip curled a little. That's what he deserves for trying to scare me yesterday. Then he left that thought to go as Pete heaved again, stepping back and leaning against the wall to wait. Chuck knew Dad's leaving had changed everyone. Pete was angry all the time. Mom kept searching for new things to make her happy. As for himself, he just tried to keep busy. He liked to hang out with his friends, he liked to play video games. He was pretty interested in puzzles. Yeah, middle school sucked. But going to school was just part of life you had to get through. Every once in a while, he felt challenged by a project. Then he'd complete it and get bored again until something else caused him to rest. He got why Pete hated him half the time, because Mom made Pete watch over him so much. He tried not to be annoying, but everything that came out of his mouth seemed to annoy Pete. Maybe it was just like that with all brothers. Chuck didn't know it because he didn't have another brother to compare to. The toilet flushed. A minute later, Pete swung open the door. A wave of serious stink wafted at Chuck and he waved a hand in front of his nose. Pete didn't look so good. His face was so pale and his freckles stood out like tiny bugs on his cheeks. His dark hair stuck up in different directions, like he jammed his finger in a socket and it shocked him himself. And there were dark circles under his eyes. Jeez, Pete, what's the matter with you? Nothing, Pete spat out. Something didn't agree with me. Probably something from that stupid Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Chuck didn't think so. Do you want me to call Mom? Pete shoved him aside. No. I'm not a little baby like you, Chuck the Chump. Chuck felt his shoulders stiffen. He hated that stupid nickname. Whatever, he mumbled. He slammed and locked the bathroom door behind him. Pete chugged an energy drink with triple caffeine while running to his biology class. But he still felt drained and exhausted. He had some pretty crazy dreams last night. He couldn't remember much. Only that there had been his blood. It was everywhere, pouring all over him. Down his face, over his chest and arms. When he jerked awake, his blankets were tangled around his body. He'd fallen to the floor, trying to unwind the blankets just so he could rush to the bathroom to blow chunks. He shivered just thinking about it. But he rolled his shoulders and shoved that not-so-fun memory away. He probably should have stayed home, but calling his mom at work would have freaked her out and she would have been asking him a million questions. He decided to just get through today somehow. He loped into his classroom 5 minutes after the bell. Mr. Dinglewood, you are late, droned Mr. Watson in a bored voice. A note? Pete snatched off his hat and shook his head with a negative. He took an empty stool at the workstations in the far back, next to a kid in a black leather jacket and purple hair. Pete zipped his hat into his pack and set it on the floor, then wiped some of the sweat off his forehead. Pete zipped his hat into his pack and set it on the floor, and then wiped some of the sweat off his forehead. He shifted awkwardly on the stool. Why couldn't he seem to keep still? As I was saying, class, today we will be dissecting a frog, said Mr. Watson. You have all been quizzed on the safety rules for the tools on this procedure. You will work as a team with your partner to fill out the lab sheet. I expect you all to be mature young people. I know that it will be hard for some of you, but there is no funny business here or you will fail. You do not want to fail. You have 30 minutes, starting now. When they both turned toward the dead frog sprawled out in front of them, Leather Jacket Guy leaned forward. Dude, what's the matter with you? Pete shook his head. Nothing. Leather Jacket Guy gave him a, yeah, right, look and picked up a small scalpel. 10 minutes in, Pete yawned. His mouth was dry and his hand was starting to shake from the precise cutting. Leather Jacket Guy smirked. Hey, check this out, he said, and poked the frog in its eye with the scalpel. A weird liquid gushed out. Sick, right? He then shoved the blade into the frog's arm and sliced it off. He picked up the tiny hand and waved it at Pete. Pete shook his head. I need a break. Look, I'm sorry. I swear I'll stop messing around. He held out the little frog hand. Here, let's shake on it. The kid chuckled as Pete pushed off the stool and headed for the classroom water fountain. He took a long couple drinks. Dang, he was so thirsty. And he was starving too. His stomach decided to growl then, since he'd skipped breakfast trying to make it to school on time. As he was heading back to his workstation, Mr. Watson stopped him. Everything going well, Mr. Dinglewood? He asked. Mr. Watson was shorter than him, with white hair and a white mustache. Glasses hung on the tip of his red nose, as if he was looking down on Pete, even though that was physically impossible. "Yeah, things are fine," Pete blurted. Mr. Watson frowned. "Glad to hear it. Now please return to your dissection lab. You of all people cannot afford to fail." "That's what I'm doing," Pete muttered, whirling around. It all went downhill from there. Pete took a quick, long stride and his foot landed on his pack strap instead of landing securely on the floor. That was when he slipped, losing his footing, falling backward, and he felt his toe connect with a leather jacket guy in a brutal way. The kid yelped. Mr. Watson shouted something in reply. Pete landed on his back. His breath knocked out of him. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes, he spotted the kid's scalpel in the air. The small knife must have blown up on impact. Then, in disbelief, Pete saw the scalpel lose gravity and fall towards his face. Adrenaline spurted through his body, and with quick reflexes that came from years of playing football, Pete swatted the tool away like a deadly insect just as the blade was about to bite. The scalpel hit the stand of the workstation and fell on the floor. "Holy!" the leather jacket guy hissed. "Dear Lord, Peter, are you alright?" said Mr. Watson, hovering over him like a frightened parent. "Don't move. I'll call the nurse. Class, stay seated. Nobody move. Emergency procedure. Please, please. Out of the way." The class ignored Mr. Watson and crowded around Pete as his chest rose up and down with heavy breaths. He didn't think he'd hit his head, but he felt dizzy and kind of out of it, not to mention mortified. Someone whispered, "Way to go, Dingleberry." A couple kids giggled. "Yeah, what a loser. Now we know why he was kicked off the football team." Pete slowly sat up, his face flushed red. Dang. There was no doubt he should have stayed home. Somehow, Pete managed to get through the rest of the school day. The nurse had checked him out and given him an ice pack and sent him on his way. It was a relief when the final bell rang, and he walked quickly around slow-moving kids, through the doors, and down the school's front steps. When he checked his phone, he saw he had a new text from his mother. He rubbed a hand over his face. What now? Couldn't he get through one day without her asking him to do something? Yeah, he loved his mom. But now that she didn't have his dad to help her, Pete was always on call. She better not ask him to take Chuck out again. He wouldn't do it. He'd say, "Nope, sorry, I'm sick." He clicked on the text. "Hi, Pete. After school, could you swing by the butcher and pick up my order of pork chops?" He responded flatly. "Fine." She responded, "Thank you." Heart emoji. Pete popped a wad of watermelon gum into his mouth and set off walking towards the butcher shop, which was a couple of blocks out of his way. He wanted to get his license, and that was the plan 6 months ago, before the divorce, but now everyone had just seemed forgotten. He finally arrived at Barney's butcher shop. During a lull, no cars were parked in front, which was perfect because he could get the order and get out fast. Pete pushed through the glass door, and no one was even behind the counter. Sales prices were posted on the glass, and some old rock music was playing from the back. He walked to the display case of raw meats, scanning left, then right. "Hello?" he called out. "Yo, I got an order to pick up." There wasn't a bell to ring, so he stood around for another minute, waiting for someone. When no one came up, he'd about had it. He knocked on the glass counter a couple times. "Hello?" Finally, he took matters into his own hands, walking behind the tall display case. "Hey, anyone here, or what?" On the other side of the case was a long butcher table with watery, red liquid on it. The overpowering scent of meat and blood made his guts swish around again. The gum in his mouth turned sour. He put a hand to his stomach as if to ease it. "I will not blow chunks. I will not blow chunks, he thought to himself. He looked around to distract himself, but all he saw were pictures of butchered animals. When he craned his head in another direction, he was surrounded by rows of lethal-looking knives and cleavers hanging above his head. A new wave of dizziness washed over him. He set his hand out for balance on the butcher table, felt the watery liquid on his fingertips, and broke out in a cold sweat. Wham! A huge meat cleaver slammed down into the wood, barely missing his wrist. Pete shot backward, protecting his hand against his chest, knocking into the display case with his back. He gazed at the meat cleaver embedded in the wood. The handle vibrated in the air as if the force had been incredibly strong. His gaze whipped towards the other hanging tools. One empty hook was swaying slowly. The meat cleaver had fallen from the hook. Fallen? He didn't think so. He didn't think someone or something could fall so forcefully on its own. But what else could have happened? Hey, what are you doing back here? A stocky older man wearing a bloody apron waddled into the area, wiping his hands with a towel. Employees only. Can't you read the signs? Pete pointed to the cleaver stuck in the butcher table. Nah. You can't be playing with my knives. You're trying to get me in trouble? Health department will have my license. Spit it out! What's the matter? I didn't touch anything. It just fell. The old man narrowed his eyes. No way these knives fall from those hooks, kid. If that was the case, I'd be missing a lot more fingers than the ones I already cut off. The man raised his left hand to show a missing pinky finger and a ring finger with its top chopped off. The skin looked smooth on the two oddly shaped finger stumps. When Pete started to shake, the man laughed. Scared? Never seen someone with missing fingers before? Well, keep your fingers and hands away from sharp objects and, kid, you should be just fine. Maybe. He cracked up again, and Pete swallowed hard. Just here to pick up an order for Dinglewood. The butcher waved a hand towards the back room. Yeah, got that in the fridge. Chops, right? I'll be right with you. Pete whipped open the front door to his house and slammed it as soon as he stormed through. He tossed his pack on the floor and strode into the kitchen, where he opened the fridge, threw the chops in, and grabbed a soda. He shut the door with his hip and chugged the whole can. The cola soothed his throat and the sweetness calmed him down a little. What a freaky day. He took off his cap and ran his hand over his neck. He just needed to eat and rest and forget about everything else. No more crazy dreams, or weird kids with scalpels, and definitely no more butcher shops. His mom was going to have to pick up the meat herself from now on. He glanced out the kitchen window when he heard the backyard gate creak open. Chuck pushed his bike in and leaned it on the side of the house before coming through the side door. Pete felt his irritation bubble up. Are you crazy? He asked Chuck. If Mom finds out you bike to school... Someone hogged the bathroom this morning and I was late for the bus. And I didn't pick you up. I'm busted. I won't tell. Yeah, right. You always snitch. Chuck rolled his eyes. I didn't tell her about you forcing me into the maintenance room. Did I? Not yet. When I saw how you wanted to tell her last night at dinner, you thought you were real funny. Chuck held up his hands in exasperation. Well, I didn't. That has to count for something. Pete shrugged. Still, you can't be trusted. Fine, maybe I should tell her just to get you busted. How about that? See? You are a snitch. Shut up! You are! You shut up, you little twerp! Chuck gave in. Whatever, jerkwad, he muttered. He grabbed a loaf of bread from the bread box, then peanut butter from the pantry and jelly from the fridge. He pulled a butter knife from the drawer and started to make himself a sandwich. When he saw Pete eyeing his sandwich, he lifted his eyebrows. What? You want one? Pete hesitated. Don't know. Well, make your own. Pete held a hand to his stomach, debating if he could handle it. You still sick or something? Chuck wanted to know. Just an off day. Pete shrugged. Why? What happened? Pete snapped. Don't worry about it. None of your business. No freaking way would he tell anyone else about the embarrassing incident in biology class. And the flying cleavers. Especially not to his twerp brother who would run and tell Mom to freak her out. Fine. Chuck finished making a sandwich and slid it across the counter towards Pete. Peace offering? Pete lifted his eyebrows in surprise as Chuck began making another. You know, Mom filled out that organ donor paperwork for us, Chuck said, like it was a casual conversation. Pete's jaw dropped. What? Why? Chuck nodded, flashing his braces, looking almost pleased. She said you'd come around to the idea eventually. But I told her not to! Since when does Mom ever listen to what we want? Chuck took a bite from his sandwich and kept talking with his mouth full. It's not a big deal anyway. You're dead when they take your organs. Your life, soul, whatever is gone. What do I care? Why do you even care so much? Pete didn't even know where to start. Here he was, trying to save his body parts all day long, and his stupid mom was trying to give them away. It's just a stupid idea. Chuck gave him a curious look. Wait, you're scared, aren't you? No. Shut up! I looked it up. You want to know how they cut into you and take your organs? It's so cool. They split you open, like in a Y incision. Then your guts are all hanging out. And then they remove everything piece by piece. He made a face with his eyes and rolled back and his tongue hanging out. Your intestines are like super long, right? So they just pull them out like a rope of link sausage. Chuck made a motion with his hands as if he was pulling out a long piece of rope from his stomach. I said, shut up! Pete grabbed the sandwich and fled to his room. The next morning, Pete sipped from his triple caffeine energy drink as he walked to school. The sun was out, which improved the walk a lot. Today had to be better than yesterday. He figured. Last night, he had weird dreams again, but luckily the details drifted away as soon as he woke up. And there hadn't been any spewing his guts into the toilet, so that was a score. He'd barely spoken to his mom last night or this morning. Why she had signed him up as a donor when he told her not to. He didn't even want to eat the pork chops he'd picked up last night. All they did was remind him that he nearly lost his hand. When he passed a construction site, he paused a moment. He looked across the street and decided against crossing with all the busy traffic. Instead, he'd go right under the scaffolding. Pete scanned the boards above him, making sure there weren't any weird tools that could fall on his head. He heard motorized saws and drills sounding from the inside of the site, but nothing coming from the scaffolding. When he figured he was safe, he relaxed a little. Just in case, he walked cautiously under the boards, with quick glances above him. One thing he'd learned recently was that he couldn't be too careful. As he neared the end of the scaffolding, he took a breath of relief. Piece of cake. From inside the site, he heard a funny buzz, and then a harsh clank. The hairs on Pete's arms stood up. What the hell? Watch out! Someone shouted. Pete spotted something moving fast in his peripheral vision. His head turned in time to see a circular buzzsaw blade flying in his direction. reminding him of a flying frisbee with sharp teeth. His jaw went slack. His adrenaline spiked. He dove backward as the round blade flew through the air toward him. He held up his hand in defense, like maybe he could catch it, but then he realized that was the worst thing to do and tried to pull his hand out of the path of the flying blade. He thought he was home free when he felt it slice into his flesh, just above his wrist, followed by a sharp stinging. He crashed to the ground, his drink pouring over him. Air gushed out of his lungs. His eyes were wide as he lifted his arm, watching in shock as blood poured down his skin. "Oh man! Kid! Someone call 911! A construction worker rushed to his side, grabbing onto his helmet as if not sure what to do with his hands. "Let me get a clean rag. Just don't move!" The worker ran off, and other people started to gather around. "Kid, are you okay?" A man in a suit rushed to Pete and leaned down. He had a phone to his ear. "Hello? Yeah, there's been an accident. There's a teenager. He's bleeding. On the arm. At a construction site. On Wellington and Salisbury. Hurry." "Please. Don't worry, kid. Help is on the way." "Yes, he's conscious." Dazed, Pete glanced at the open gash on his arm. It wasn't very deep, but he could have died. "Pete!" Mom yelled as she stepped into the house. "Pete!" "In my room," he called out. He was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. After the paramedic bandaged him at the construction site, he called his mom and walked back home. He didn't even want to wait for a ride. He just wanted to get as far away from the construction site as possible. Now his energy was spent. He'd noticed his back was sore, so he'd gone to the bathroom and lifted his shirt in front of the mirror. As if the sliced arm wasn't bad enough, he also had a bunch of fresh scratches on his back from falling on the sidewalk. Yesterday he had a couple of close calls. This latest accident was more dangerous. This time, there was actual blood. Mom swept into his bathroom in a flurry of nerves. "Oh my gosh, my poor baby!" Pete sighed. "Mom, I'm okay. It's just a small wound. I didn't need stitches. Everything's fine." She grabbed his hand, scanning the bandage on his arm. "How did this happen?" She felt his cheek, ran a hand over his head, and gave him a kiss on the forehead. Pete looked at his arm and answered honestly. I don't know, really." Her eyes went wide. "What do you mean you don't know? Were you not paying attention? Was the construction worker being negligent? Do we need to call a lawyer? Maybe we should go to the hospital." "No. Okay, Mom. Just relax. Jeez." Well, it was kind of nice to have her attention for once. Her anxiety put him on edge. "No, I am not relaxing. You could have seriously gotten hurt." She straightened and crossed her arms with a determined look on her face. "That's it. You are not walking to school anymore. You can ride a bus or get a ride. Maybe I can change my schedule. I'll drive you and your brother to school. I think I can make it work." Then she placed her hands on her hips as if she was suddenly Wonder Woman and there was nothing that could stop her. "I will make it work." "Mom, stop. It was just a freak accident," which he'd been having a lot of lately. There was a knock at the front door before it swung open. Pete shot up on his bed. "Who the hell is that?" "Pete, your language." Hello? Anybody home?" bellowed a familiar voice. Pete stared at his mom accusingly. "Dad, of course I called your father. Over here, Bill. In Pete's room." Quickly, she started to pick up dirty clothes that were thrown on the floor. "I have to call him when there's an emergency. Gosh, Pete, this room's a mess." Like that was anything new. Dad filled the doorway, wearing cargo pants and a t-shirt, with his pocket vest and a floppy canvas hat. There was a forced smile buried under his scruffy beard. "There's my boy." "You were fishing?" Mom asked, surprised. "No, not yet. I took the rest of the day off, making it an early weekend." "I'm here to take my firstborn with me to the lake." "How you doing there, Pete? Let's see that arm." His dad stepped toward the bed, kicking water bottles as he went. His jaw hardened, but he didn't say anything about the mess. Pete raised his arm for his dad's inspection, unsure what to make of his visit. He hadn't seen his dad in a couple of months, only talked to him on the phone a few times. Suddenly, he was home, like, really home. He hadn't been inside the house in nearly 6 months. It used to be so normal having mom and dad together, and now it felt super awkward. Dad made a sound. Doesn't look too bad. You'll be good as new before you know it. Yeah, well, I don't think I'm up for fishing today, Dad. In fact, he knew he wasn't up for it. He was sore and wanted to lay down and go to sleep. Pete gave his mom a pleading look.
Help me.
He hesitated. He's tired, Bill. Maybe another time. It's been a crazy morning. Dad waved his hand. Nonsense. He's fine. Fishing calms the nerves and relaxes the mind. Come on now. Get ready to go, Pete. I got sandwiches already packed. It's gonna be a great time. You'll see. The sun was brutal, even through a haze of clouds. Pete leaned back on a folding chair next to his dad on an old pier. A cooler sat between them, and an old tackle box was spread open at his dad's feet. Pete's arm was sore, so he didn't do much casting of the fishing line. Instead, he just took in the scene. A handful of small boats were in the lake with people, mostly old people, fishing in them. Every few minutes, the water rippled in the stiff breeze and brought with it the scent of decaying fish and plants. Pete couldn't remember his dad catching any fish at the local lake. He wondered if anyone caught anything. Ever. It seemed weird, fishing alone with his dad. It probably had been a couple years since they'd been to the lake, and Chuck was usually tagging along, filling the silence with a bunch of questions for Dad. Chuck always had to know things. Why something worked, or how it worked, or where things were made. Pete wasn't sure if Chuck really wanted the answers or the attention, but either way he was used to it. Chuck liked to ask questions, and Pete didn't care to talk much. So Pete, I want to know how you're doing, Dad said. Pete lifted his hat and scratched his head and slipped his cap back on. I'm fine, Dad. Your mother says you stopped playing football and haven't been getting along much with your brother. His dad didn't use an accusing tone, but Pete could feel his disapproval, just like he had with his messy room. His dad always acted like it was Pete's fault when things went the wrong way. Outside events, like, say, parental actions, didn't come into the equation. It must be cool to be an adult and be right all the time, Pete thought. Pete shrugged, even though his dad wasn't looking at him. I'm done with football. It's not for me anymore. The breeze blew and someone's fishing line flew past Pete's face. He flinched and looked at the guy floating in his boat a couple yards away, paying no attention to where he was casting the line. His dad said, "Alright, that's your choice about football, but you're Chuck's big brother, and there's no choice in that." Pete didn't exactly need to be reminded, but his dad went on, "And as a big brother, you have some responsibility. I was a big brother to your Aunt Lucy. Still am when she needs me. She's got a husband now, so she doesn't depend on me much anymore." At the topic of husband, he seemed to get a little uncomfortable. Pete ground his teeth together. Too bad he forgot his gun. Lectures were always boring and a waste of airspace. But at least the gum would have been a distraction. He stared out across the lake, hoping something might break up this uncomfortable moment. But anyway, sometimes responsibility can be a lot for a kid, Dad said, clearing his throat. You know, with school grades and girls making you feel all funny. His dad gave him a side glance. Got any questions about girls? Pete's cheeks burned and he shook his head adamantly in a negative way. Okay, well, my point is, if you need to talk to someone, I'm here for you, son. His dad turned to him fully then, staring like he was waiting for Pete to say something big. Pete frowned. Okay. His dad ran a hand down his beard. Or if it's easier to talk to a stranger, I can I can find you a counselor. What? No, I don't need a counselor. Well, with your wrist. His eyes went to Pete's bandage. What about it? It was an accident. His dad's gaze became more intense. Was it? Was it really, Pete? Pete jerked back. You think I did this to myself? I've heard divorce can affect families in different ways. I didn't hurt myself, Dad. Jeez. Pete scrubbed a hand down his face in frustration. A fishing line zipped by his face again and he jerked to the left to avoid it. If only the old guys would watch what they were doing. Dad blew out a breath. Oh yeah. Got you pretty good, but you'll be fine. We're lucky it didn't take out your eye. So I guess Pete had a bad day. Pete and Dad came home and Mom rushed to Pete. His face was all bandaged up. Chuck's eyes widened. Wow, he almost looked like Frankenstein. But he'd have to save that nickname for another day. How did this happen? Mom practically shrieked. Oh, Pete, your poor face. Hey there, Chuck, my boy. Hi, Dad, said Chuck, and gave a little wave. He remembered when he was little and used to climb onto his dad's legs until he picked him up. Chuck wondered when he stopped doing that. Dad threw his hands in the air. Now, Audrey, let's stay calm. It was a freak accident. A hook caught him by the cheek. It wasn't too bad, so I was able to patch him up myself. Her eyes widened. Another freak accident? On the same day? How's that even possible? Dad ran a hand down his beard. Not sure. I think he just needs to stay in bed, get some rest. I'm sure the accidents will pass. Yeah. Resting was what he was supposed to be doing, Mom snapped. It was your bright idea to take him to the lake so he could get hooked like a fish. Why weren't you looking out for him? Dad whipped off his canvas hat, revealing his bald head. Audrey, that's not fair. He was sitting right next to me. It was a windy day, a freak thing. Pete collapsed on the couch. He looked dazed as he watched Mom and Dad go back and forth, talking about him. Chuck wasn't used to seeing his brother look so vulnerable. He was bigger than him, mouthy, and always annoying. Now, sitting on the couch, he seemed small, almost frail. Chuck went and sat next to Peter, staring at his brother's face. You look like Frankenstein bad. Pete, does it hurt? What do you think? He muttered. Chuck nodded as if he understood. Pretty bad day, huh? So, what do you think's going on with you? Did you walk under a ladder? Break a mirror? Cross a black cat? Pete frowned. What are you talking about? He asked. What did you do to earn a streak of bad luck? Pete shook his head. It's not bad luck, and I'm not accident prone, he insisted. I don't know what it is. Chuck licked his dry lips and leaned closer to his brother. It's something weird, though, right? Mom filled me in about the weird accident with the construction site, and now this fishing thing. Chuck had been thinking about all the weird stuff that piled up on his brother's life. It had all been the makings of a really good puzzle. This all started when you tried to scare me at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he pointed out. Pete tried to scowl, but he winced as the gesture hurt his face. What? Now you're trying to say this is something like karma? No way. That's bull. I don't believe in that stuff. Chuck shrugged. You can't deny it's weird, though. Pete was silent. A moment. Then he said quietly, It wasn't just those things. Chuck raised his eyebrows, intrigued. What do you mean? Pete shook his head. I can't talk about it now. I'll tell you later. He nodded towards his parents as if he didn't want them to hear. Chuck went to his room and sat on the floor in front of his TV and started playing video games. He didn't really think Pete would tell him anything more. A couple hours later, Pete walked into his room and sat on his bed. His cheeks were puffed out below his eyes, and they looked bloodshot. Chuck paused his game and looked at him, waiting. In school yesterday, I slipped and fell in biology class. I accidentally kicked a kid and his scalpel went flying. When I hit the ground, the scalpel was going for my eye. Chuck's mouth dropped. No way! I knocked it away before it could hit me. Chuck was impressed. Quick thinking. Pete looked pleased for a second. Yeah, when you got the skills. What else? Pete shrugged. I went to pick up the chops at the butcher for Mom, but there wasn't anybody behind the counter, so I walked in the back to find someone. Out of nowhere, a cleaver falls from a hook and slams into the butcher's block by my hand. Holy cow, that's close! Yeah, crazy. I mean, if I believed in weird stuff, I'd be thinking something was up. But I don't believe in anything like curses? Pete frowned. Get real, Chuck. Chuck sighed. Why did he have such a stubborn brother? What else can explain this? 4 times! It's got to be something. Come on, Pete. Whatever it was, I'm done with it. Pete cleared his throat. Just in case it's because of, dragging you to see Foxy. He stuck his hand towards Chuck. Chuck's eyes widened as he looked at it. Pete lifted his eyebrows. Well, shake. Might as well, Chuck thought. Hesitantly, he took his brother's hand and shook it. Pete took his hand back and even apologized. I'm sorry about trying to scare you. It was dumb. But let's call a truce between us. Chuck smiled. Okay, truce. Thanks, Pete. Pete stood up unsteadily. I'm going back to bed. Later. Later, Chuck murmured, as his brother walked out of his room. Then he started thinking, rummaging through his desk for a notebook to write in. His brother may want to brush off all his ideas, but there had to be an explanation. There had to be. What game are you playing? Pete asked Chuck from the bedroom doorway. He'd spent most of Saturday in bed. Now he felt the need to get up and walk around the house. Lying in bed gave him too much thinking time. He kept replaying each freak accident over and over again in his head, and it wasn't cool. Just an indie adventure game. Want to check it out? Pete shrugged and sat cross-legged with his brother on the floor. Chuck's room was a lot different than Pete's. First of all, Chuck actually used his hamper instead of dropping his clothes all over the floor. His bed was made, his desk was clear of extra paper, he had a bookshelf with books of aliens and conspiracy theories, a couple of gamer posters were pinned neatly to the wall. Chuck explained the game. You see, I'm the mage, and I have to look for all the hidden ingredients to make a potion to stop an evil wizard. He has my village under a spell, and I need to break the curse with the potion and release the village before it's too late. What happens if you're too late? Then I lose them forever. They remain under the control of the evil wizard, and that is not happening. Pete smirked. You like to be the hero, don't you? It's the only way to win. Want to play with me? Sure. Chuck's eyes lit up, and he grabbed the other controller. You can be my apprentice! Why am I the apprentice? Why can't I be the mage and you be the sidekick? Chuck shook his head. You have a lot to learn. Pete turned to their mom, who was leaving the doorway. She was smiling. Hey, Mom. Pete said. You guys need anything? How about some popcorn? Could use some popcorn. Thanks. And a juice box for me, Chuck said. Pete played the game for a couple hours and then went back to bed. He had to admit, it was nice getting along with his little brother again. After shaking hands and calling a truce, it was almost like it used to be when they were little, when they didn't have a care in the world, before the resentments, the name-calling, the divorce. He had to admit, he missed those days. But before Pete knew it, Sunday night rolled around and he started to get ready to go back to school. To his relief, the swelling in his face had gone down. He'd removed the bandage from his arm, exposing a fresh scab on the wound right above his wrist. It made him think of his dad accusing him of hurting himself. Sure, thoughts of escaping his parents crossed his mind sometimes, but not the way his dad was thinking. Pete had spent most of the day binge-watching TV. He hadn't dared to leave the house, afraid he'd have another freak accident. Not that his mom would have let him leave, anyway. She kept a close eye on him all weekend. Really stepped up for him. Maybe he'd cut her some slack when she started piling a bunch of stuff for him to do again. If all these freak accidents had been some weird karma thing, he'd apologized to Chuck, hadn't he? So that meant he should be free and clear of whatever it was. But he still had a feeling that lingered in his gut, like a sickness. He worried that everything might not be over, that it might never be. Then came a knock at the door. "Come in," he called out, and Chuck stuck his head in. Normally, he'd yell at him to get the heck out of his room, but things were different with the truce. Picking on his little brother didn't seem as much fun anymore. Not they'd tell him that. "Yeah," Pete said. His brother stepped in with a notebook in one hand and closed the door behind him. He fished his inhaler out of his shorts pocket, took a puff, then slipped it back in. "How you doing?" he asked Pete. "Okay, I guess." "You ready to go back to school tomorrow?" "Yeah, right." Chuck flashed his braces and ran a hand through his hair. "Just checking." "What's up with the notebook?" "Something I've been working on this weekend since you told me about the accident." Chuck walked over to Pete and flipped open his notebook and showed him some sort of handwritten chart. There were 5 boxes arranged in a circle with arrows pointed between them. On the top of the chart was a box labeled Foxy the Pirate. The following boxes read Bioclass, Butcher Shop, Construction Site, and Lake. The final arrow pointed back at Foxy. "What's this mean?" Pete wanted to know. "It means, I think the point of origin, where this all started, was in the maintenance room with Foxy." "Yeah, we already talked about that. From there, each freak accident led to the next, and now in order for this to all be over, you have to go back and fix whatever you did in the first place." "I did. I apologized. It was a stupid prank, okay? Everything should be good now. You forgive me, right?" "Yeah, we're brothers. Of course I forgive you," Chuck said. "But in all the games I play, you have to face the ultimate bad guy, the villain. Just like with the game we played last night. The mage had to fight the evil wizard in the end in order to set the village free with the potion." Pete forced a laugh as his stomach curdled in dread. "Bad guy? Who? Foxy the animatronic?" "Maybe. But what exactly happened after I ran out of there that day?" Pete looked back at the TV, glimpsing an action movie. "Nothing. Foxy sang a song and then I left. No big deal. You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm, yar." Pete's pulse picked up as he heard the words in his head. "What was the song, Pete?" He shook his head. "Just a stupid song about being a pirate." "What were the words exactly? Who cares what the words were?" "I do, Pete. It's important." "Fine. Something about how if you want to be a pirate, you'll have to lose an eye and an arm. See?" Chuck licked his dry lips. Then he grabbed a pencil from Pete's cluttering desk and started writing. "What are you doing?" "Hold on a sec." After a minute, he shoved the notebook into Pete's hands. Chuck had written down additional notes under the boxes. Foxy the Pirate, pirate song, lose an eye, lose an arm. Bioclass, nearly lost eye. Butcher Shop, nearly lost arm. Construction site, nearly lost arm. Lake, nearly lost eye. Pete shook his head in denial. "No," he muttered, as he started to shake. "You're wrong." "You can't ignore the facts, Pete. Foxy wants you to become a pirate, and the accidents are getting more and more dangerous. No! He yelled. Foxy's a damn robot! He's made of metal and gears! He ripped the page out of the notebook and started to shred it. This is all made up in your messed up gamer brain. It's fancy. Not real. Pete, stop. Shut up! Just get out of my room! He shoved his brother back and threw his notebook at him. Chuck stumbled back in shock, his face turning red. I'm trying to help you! Pete jammed a finger in the air towards Chuck. No! You're trying to scare me for all the times I've scared you! It's always winning with you, right? Well, this isn't some game for you to win. I know that. I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to figure this out. Mom appeared at the door. Boys, what's all the yelling? What's going on here? Tell Chuck the chump to get out of my room. Don't call me that, Frankenstein face. Pete's face scrunched up. Oh, you've been waiting to use that one, haven't you? You're gonna pay for that. The truce is officially over. Fine by me. You can take your stupid truce and jam it. Boys, calm down. I said, get out of my room! I am! Chuck scooped up his notebook and ran out. Pete turned back to his mom after a moment with an exaggerated sigh. She closed the door. Pete was so freaking angry. He started to cry. Pete tossed and turned in his bed, his mind wide awake. His pajamas felt too warm, his blankets too heavy. His bedroom was dark except for the moonlight that filtered through the curtains on his window. As he stared at the curtain, he thought he saw something dark flash behind the fabric. Pete rose to his feet and walked to the window, pushing the curtain aside. The front yard was quiet. A car was parked at the curb. A row of trees lined the streets. Nothing out of the ordinary. He rolled his shoulders to release the tension. Then he went back to bed. He hit his pillow a couple of times to get comfortable, then stared at the ceiling, and stared some more. No use. He couldn't fall asleep. A moment had passed, as he found his eyes lured back to the window. Don't get up. Don't look. Don't get up. Don't look. Don't get up. Don't look. But he couldn't help himself. Something felt strange. He was alone in his room, but he felt like he was being watched, which was completely stupid. Sighing, he stood and walked back to the window, again pushing the curtain aside. He was about to step away when he caught a movement behind the trees. Was something or someone there? Pete's pulse raced. He rubbed his eyes, blinked, and searched for more movement. But nothing was there. His mind was messing with him. He was freaking paranoid. He took a breath and released it. It was probably just the wind blowing the branches. He scrubbed his hands down his face and lay back down in the bed. The wind howled, and somehow that calmed him a little. Then, the backyard gate creaked. The gate must have come unlatched with the wind, right? Just to be certain. Pete listened carefully. An owl hooted. A door creaked. A second later, he jerked upright, his heart pounding. Was that creaking inside the house? He crept to his bedroom door and slowly opened it. He searched the empty hallway. No one was lurking around. He was starting to really freak himself out. Mom and Chuck were asleep. No one else was in the house. Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep, he told himself. He stomped to his bed, threw himself down, and squeezed his eyes shut. He thought he heard a footstep. Just go to sleep. The floor creaked outside his door, and a chill crept down his spine. No one else is here. No one else is here. No one else is here. He told himself. It was just his imagination. But the air seemed to shift around him. The hairs on his arms stood up, and he couldn't deny his unease anymore. When he opened his eyes, Foxy stood above him. Terror sucked in the air from Pete's lungs. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Foxy's yellow eyes glowed in the darkness of the room. His jaw hung open, flashing his sharp teeth. Foxy lifted his hook and slashed the sharp tip in front of Pete's face, the metal whizzing by his nose. Pete shoved himself off of his bed, his body shaking, but he couldn't get off the floor. Foxy pivoted, looming over him. The shifting of gears filled the room as Foxy swung up with his hook. "You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm." "No!" Pete breathed. Foxy slammed his hook into Pete's eye, and there was an audible pop. Blood poured from his eye socket as Pete screamed. Foxy's mechanical foot slammed onto his right arm, crushing muscle and grinding against bone. Pete convulsed in agony. He tried to push Foxy off of him. Too heavy, too strong. Pete's heart pounded. Tears and blood ran down his face. Foxy hacked down, his hook tearing into Pete's hand, splintering bone and tearing muscle until it was ripped off completely. Foxy lifted his hook and watched Pete's hand dangle, blood spilling down. Pete screamed. "Ah!" He woke up screaming into his pillow. Since he was finding it hard to breathe, he bolted up, gasping for air. Sweat stuck his shirt to his skin. Sunlight was beaming through his window. He was home, in his bedroom, alone. He spread his hands out, fingers wide, and he saw they were attached. He reached for his eyes, and both were still there. He was alive, and he could see. All body parts were intact. He took a deep breath of relief. Just a nightmare. Why did it have to seem so real? Pete swallowed hard as his stomach turned and he started to tremble. He felt as if he'd had a version of the same dream before, but this time he remembered every detail. With a hood pulled over his head, Pete walked into North Hillside High School on Monday morning and gaped at the huge hanging sign in the hallway. "Find your treasure on the high seas. Homecoming carnival today at lunch." A pirate head was drawn under the slogan saying, "Aye, matey!" While flashing a hook for a hand, Pete nearly turned around and walked home. But he knew how nervous his mom had been when she dropped him off at school. "Everything is gonna be okay, Pete," she said, like she was trying to convince herself. "Yeah, Mom. Everything will be fine," he reassured her. "Mom?" "Yes, honey?" "You're a good mom." She blinked rapidly and smiled. "Thank you, son. You make me very happy." The truth was, he hoped everything should be fine. He realized that all he wanted was to have everything back to normal, with boring classes, unnecessary tests, and hell, even taking care of his little brother. He was ready for it all to be over. And now he could see that he had an okay life, even if his parents weren't together anymore. His parents loved him and Chuck, even though they were wrapped up in their own worries and obligations. He had a nice and comfortable home, a few friends. He wasn't one of those kids to make the best out of high school, but he'd get through it like everybody else. He walked further down the hall, taking in posters on the walls. There were pirate ships, parrots, skulls, and crossbones, and the pirate heads everywhere he turned. The student council always went all out for homecoming week. He could feel people gaping at the mess on his face, but he tried not to pay attention as they whispered and pointed. He walked to his locker to spin the combo, taking care to avoid a kid in a pirate's costume and an eye patch. He unloaded some overdue homework from his backpack, then pulled out his biology book for his first class. "Dude, what happened to your face?" Duncan Thompson asked him. Duncan was Pete's locker neighbor, a short and stocky dude with a buzzed head. They used to play football together. For his version of school spirit, he had skulls and crossbones painted on both of his cheeks. Pete shrugged as he shut his locker. "Fishing accident. No big deal." "Like how? You get cut with a knife or something?" Pete didn't want to go into the details. "Something like that." "Makes you look so gnarly though. Like nobody should mess with you. You know what I mean?" Pete cracked a smile. Cool. Gonna miss you at the homecoming game this week, dude. You would have looked pretty intimidating on the field. Sporting a fresh scar on your face. Yeah. Thanks. Duncan smiled and held up his fist. Pete bumped it. He walked away from his locker feeling a little better. He held his head high and people watched him, ignoring the stupid pirate decorations and costumes. Yeah, he had a don't mess with me vibe going on, and he liked it. Pete's morning classes went smoothly. He didn't dare get up from his seat during class, and he stayed far away from any sharp objects. When the lunch bell rang, he felt surprisingly good, as if he really did end his streak of freak accidents. Now he just needed to make amends with his little brother. The worst part was he had made amends before he'd blown it again by yelling at Chuck and kicking him out of his room. He just didn't want to believe that what Chuck believed, that it wasn't over yet, and that he had to go back to face Foxy. Pete shivered. He'd apologize to Chuck and reinstate their truce. And Chuck would understand. He was pretty sure. His little brother seemed to forgive him easily, and Pete was really ready to start fresh. As his mom would say sometimes, it would be like a new beginning. Never really understood what she meant by that, until now. The sun was out and he stepped out onto the school courtyard where the carnival was happening. Food booths and games were set up and spread about. Kids roamed around eating cotton candy and junk food. There was a water dunk tank with their vice principal, Mr. Sanchez, waiting to be dunked. A pie eating contest was set up along with an arm wrestling table, water gun races and more. A DJ was playing music and giving away t-shirts. Pete pulled off his hood and walked around, hoping to find something good to eat. Not long after he started browsing, he ran into Maria. She was working in a booth. "Oh, hi Pete," she said. She was wearing a red scarf around her head and the big, round earrings. "Whoa, what happened to you?" She pointed to her own cheek. "Hey, Maria." Pete shrugged. "It was a dumb fishing accident." "Ouch, that sucks. It seems like you haven't been around much." Pete's eyebrows raised. She'd noticed? Yeah, some stuff going on. Everything's cool, though." She nodded as if she understood. "So, you want to win something? All you have to do is stick your hand in this box and see what you get." She nodded at a large table with a hole in the center. Pete stuck his hands in his jean pockets. "No, that's cool. I'm good." She smiled. "Come on, it's just for fun. Don't you want a prize?" Pete's stomach quivered as he pulled out his right hand, closing his grip into a fist. All the freaky stuff was over, he assured himself. He was safe now. "Sure, I guess." Hesitantly, he stuck his hand into the hole, and after a few seconds it was surrounded by something. "What the heck?" Maria let out a small laugh. "What'd you get?" He tugged his hand back, but it was stuck. He pulled out harder, and the grip on his hand tightened. Unease rippled through him. Sweat sprouted on his forehead. Pete planted his feet and tugged so hard the table started to lift. "Pete, stop! You're gonna break the table!" Maria said. "My hand's stuck." "I know, Pete. Calm down." Maria knocked on the table really hard. "Okay, stop! I said to stop!" Suddenly, Pete got his hand out and was attached to something that looked like a Chinese finger trap. Except it was big enough to cover his entire hand. Pete stared at it in disbelief. The stronger he had pulled, the tighter the trap had gripped his hand. Maria looked guilty. "I'm sorry, Pete. It's just a joke we've been playing on the students. You know, just a little fun for homecoming. Everyone else thought it was funny." "I'm not everyone else!" he snapped. A kid popped his head out of the hole in the table. His hair was spiky and he had an earring in his nose. "Dude, relax. Take a joke, why don't you?" Pete didn't even know what to say. He was that freaked out. "Not cool," he stammered, trying to pull the trap off his hand. Somehow it just gripped tighter, squeezing off his circulation. He swallowed hard. It felt like tiny knives poking under his skin. Get this thing off me! Wait, I'll help you. I know how to do it. Maria rushed out of the booth to Pete and pushed the trap closer to his hand so it would eventually loosen. I'm sorry you're so upset. Yeah, right! Just get it off already! Pete said, barely holding it together. I'm trying, okay? It's stuck for some reason. Hold on. She ran back around the booth to grab something. It wasn't stuck. It wasn't just stuck. It was getting tighter and tighter. His hand started to throb with pain. Not again, was all he could think. Hey. The kid in the box whined. Don't cut it, then we can't use it anymore. Maria came back with scissors. I have to. It's not coming loose. She cut from the open end of the trap until she finally freed his hand. By the time she got it off, Pete's skin looked completely purple and felt completely numb. He opened and closed his grip to get the circulation going again. Maria's eyes widened. Oh my gosh. Pete, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this happened. It's a freak. Don't say that. You just shouldn't have done that. You should have tried to trick me. I thought we were cool. We are. When her cheeks reddened, she bowed her head. Pete's throat tightened. I said sorry, Pete. Look, whatever. No big deal. I gotta go. Then, before she could say anything else, he stormed off, trying to calm his nerves as he rubbed his hand. What a stupid joke. How was that even funny? It was just another freak thing. He swallowed hard and his throat squeezed even more. He couldn't take any more accidents. He just couldn't, or he'd lose his mind. A rush of kids suddenly surrounded him like a herd of cattle, shoving him through the doorway of a mirror maze as they ran inside. Hey! Watch out! He yelled. He tried to get out of the pack, but there were too many of them. He just pressed against the wall and they finally passed by, laughing and screaming. Dude, look at us! There's like 20 of us in the mirrors! Someone called out as he disappeared. Pete tried to get back around through the entrance, but somehow he found himself lost in the frickin' mirror maze. He walked to the opposite direction to get directly to the exit. Instead, though, he came to a dead end, and a pirate appeared in the mirror with a hat slanted to cover his face and a lethal hook attached to his arm. When he finally moved the hat, Pete could see the pirate had the face of a fox. Pete flinched. He looked behind him, thinking the fox pirate would be standing there, but it was only just another mirror. His heartbeat picked up speed, and his brain emptied of every thought but one. I have to get out of here! He turned and turned down narrow corridors, fleeing for the exit. Images of the fox pirate and himself were reflected in every mirror. When he ran, the fox ran. Sweat dripped down Pete's face. All he knew was that he couldn't let the fox pirate catch him. He was breathing hard, and when he finally saw light at the end of the small mirrored corridor, but before he could get to it, the fox pirate jumped in front of him, raising his hook. As if by instinct, Pete reared back and punched the fox pirate in the nose. Then, the fox pirate stumbled back, a hand to his mask, and Pete rushed out. Pete was practically hyperventilating as he stepped back into the carnival. He was unsteady and off balance, as if he'd just come off the carousel. Kids laughed and stared, and questions circled round and round his mind. Where did I go? What do I do? He stepped backward and collided with someone. He rolled around to see a clown in a pirate hat. The clown waved, but Pete shoved him and ran toward a tent, pushing through the flaps of a heavy canvas. He needed to get out of the carnival, but he was so mixed up, he didn't know where he was going. He found himself rushing into a booth with several balloons pinned to a wall. A dart came at him and scraped his cheek. He hit the next one away with his hand. Someone yelled, "Hey, there's a kid in there!" Pete himself sprang forward to tell them to stop, but it was too late. That's when the last dart hit home, sticking into his skin behind his inner eye. He yelped in pain. Kids gasped. Someone screamed. Pete reached up and slowly pulled the dart out. A trickle of blood dribbled down his face. He threw the dart down and sprinted out of the other end. Panicking, he ran to another tent. Exotic birds were all caged inside, tweeting and squawking. Parrot shrieked, "Ah! Where's I? Where's I? Ah! Where's I? Where's I?" Pete halted and whirled toward the bird. His body was shaking. "What did you say?" "Ah! Ah!" The bird was bright green, with a black beak. It flapped its wings at Pete. "Ah!" Pete grabbed the cage and shook it. Feathers scattered. All the birds in the tent started to go crazy. "What did you say, stupid bird? Foxy, are you in here?" No, it didn't make sense for Foxy to be inside the bird. But Pete didn't care. Since when did any of this make sense? Whatever was happening to him, it was still happening to him, and he'd had enough. "You're not gonna win! You hear me? You are not going to win!" "Hey kid, take it easy." Someone grabbed Pete's shoulders and turned him around. "What's the matter with you?" Pete pulled away from the man, a teacher at the school. "Mr. Burke or something like that." "Nothing's the matter." Pete wiped the sweat away from his forehead and the blood from his cheek. "Nothing. Nothing except for a chain of freak accidents that involved losing an eye or an arm. Nothing except for a robotic fox that wanted him to become a pirate. Or dead. Whichever came first. Chuck had to be right at this point. He had to get back to face Foxy to finish this once and for all. Mr. Burke reached out a hand. "You don't look so good. You're bleeding from your eye. Now, let's get you to the nurse, so we can get you checked out." Pete pulled away. "No, I'm fine," he insisted. "Alright, take it easy, but what happened to your cheek?" "Too much has happened to me." Pete just shook his head. "Too much." How could he begin to explain? "I just want to help," Mr. Burke said. "What's your name?" No, you can't help me. No one can. He's after me. He's never gonna stop. I believe him now. I thought I could fix everything by apologizing." Yeah, funny, right? Like how sorry ever fixes anything. But I had to try, right? Pete laughed bitterly. "Who's after you, kid? What's his name? You can sit down with the principal, get this all sorted out. You just have to calm down. Take a deep breath." "You don't understand. There's nothing sitting down or talking about this can do. He's a freaking robot!" Mr. Burke's eyes widened. "A robot? Help me to understand. Let's just sit down a moment. You have to talk to me, okay? Sometimes we think things are worse than they really are, but once we stop and look at the whole picture, it's not that bad at all. Believe me, kid. It happens all the time." "No, it's bad. Really bad. But I know what I have to do now. It'll all be over soon. I have to go back to the point of origin, where it all began. I have to face the villain." And before a teacher could stop him, Pete slipped away. He booked it down the hallway, drenched in sweat. A hall monitor yelled at him, but Pete ignored whatever he was saying. "Had to get out. Had to end this. Had to get out. Had to end this." When he shoved open the doors, looking back over his shoulder, the hall monitor was talking into his radio. Pete missed a step and fell, stumbling down the school's front steps. His knees and palms were scraped, and his body felt bruised. But he pushed himself to his feet and kept running. As he raced across the school's lawn, he dug out his phone and clicked on Chuck's number. It went straight to voicemail because Chuck was still in class. "Chuck!" Pete heaved into the phone, short of breath. "You were right. It's been Foxy all along. I have to go back to face him. Freaky stuff is happening. But no way is Foxy gonna win, Chuck. No freaking way. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, little bro. Meet me there as soon as you can. We can finish this together." In a blind panic, Pete rushed off the sidewalk and into the street. He sensed something speeding towards him, and he turned. That's when a truck smashed into him with extreme force. His body went flying, his limbs twisting. And for one moment felt like forever. Then he crashed, his body slamming into the hard ground. He felt a crack, then a shatter. The force scalded his skin against the road as he rolled and rolled, leaving a path of blood behind him. Pain was everywhere. Everything went dark. "Chuck, you were right. It's been Foxy all along. I have to go back and face him. Freaky stuff is still happening, but no way is Foxy gonna win, Chuck. No freaking way! I'm sorry I didn't believe you, little bro. Meet me there as soon as you can. We can finish this. Together! Chuck clicked off his phone, looking over his shoulders, and he nimbly hopped off his middle school's fence, and he ran. He had to get to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza place. He had to help Pete. He pumped his arms hard and fast to get out of sight of the school. When he felt safely out of view, he pulled out his inhaler, took 2 puffs, and walked till he caught his breath. He still had a few miles to go. He wished he had his bike, but he didn't. And he wouldn't let Pete down. He wouldn't let him face Foxy alone. He started to run again. That didn't last long. He wasn't much of an athlete. Chuck could run, but was usually short distances. He always did poorly in the timed mile in gym class. He glanced around and stiffened up when he saw a police car. Oh no. He ducked into a donut shop and waited for the cruiser to drive by. He wasn't used to breaking the rules and ditching school. But this was the first time he'd done something like this. What would happen if Mom found out? Would she ground him? Pete would probably laugh at him for being so scared, but that was okay. Pete could laugh at him all the time he wanted once this was over. He was out of breath when he got to Freddy's, and his shirt was stuck to his back with sweat. He pushed through the front door and felt relief when the cool air conditioner hit his face. Little kids were running around as he made his way to the corridor that led to the maintenance room. There was some sort of manager standing in front of the walkway. Dang it! Chuck bounced to his feet, waiting for the guy to walk away. He pretended to play an arcade game until the guy finally moved along. Chuck walked slowly to the doorway, slipped through, and raced down the corridor until he got to the door. It swung open, revealing absolute darkness. Chuck swallowed hard as he stepped inside, and the door slammed behind him. Fear nearly swallowed him whole, but he grabbed his phone from his pocket and turned on the light. He smacked a hand to his mouth to try and stop the dumb hiccups. He flashed the phone light into the left and to the right. No freaky ghosts, no robots. He took out his inhaler and took a quick puff as he continued to look around. Still the same dusty tables, with old supply boxes and broken chairs. Like the first time they'd visited, for some reason. That felt like weeks ago. Pete? He whispered. Where are you? When there was no answer, he wondered if Pete was trying to scare him again. Then he pushed that thought away. Pete had sounded really upset in the voicemail. He'd been physically hurt, and he finally believed Chuck's theory that it all began with Foxy. They were finally agreeing on something. Now Pete was treating him like a real brother instead of a problem he had to deal with every day. Pete! Are you here? When he was answered with silence, Chuck dialed his brother's number. It rang and rang, finally going to voicemail. Pete! Where are you? I'm here with Foxy waiting for you. Call me, or just hurry up and get here. You know this place gives me the creeps. Chuck ended the call and stepped forward, aiming the phone light at the small stage. A chill ran through him and he shivered. Instinct told him to move far, far away from the stage, to get out. He couldn't, though. This wasn't about his fears. This was about his brother. Swallowing hard, he walked towards the control box. He would find out what happened to Pete that day. He really needed to know if Foxy was somehow haunting his brother. His hand was hovering over the start button when his phone rang. He jumped in the air. He quickly answered. Pete? No, son. It's Dad. Who are you? I went to the school to get you, but you weren't there. Chuck was suddenly scared he would get in trouble for ditching. His throat tightened. I'm sorry, Dad, but I had to leave. Pete needed me. I won't ever do it again. I promise. Pete? What do you mean? Did you talk to him? Not exactly. He left me a message to meet him, but he's not here yet. I don't know where he is. He won't answer his phone. Oh, son. What? What is it, Dad? A wave of dread washed over him. Why were you picking me up at school? Chuck, there's been an accident. Dad picked up Chuck at Freddy Fazbear's pizza place and drove faster than normal to Pete's high school. He didn't ask any questions about why Chuck was supposed to meet Pete there. He said that Mom had gone straight to the school when she got the call that Pete had been hit by a truck. Let's keep the ditching from school from your mother for the moment. She doesn't need any more on her plate right now. Chuck felt the guilt like a punch in the gut. Okay, Dad. You have to understand. It was for Pete. I would have never done it otherwise. I know, son. Don't worry too much about it. Brothers look out for each other. Chuck nodded as they drove closer to the high school. Chuck spotted flashing lights. Police cars were blocking the street and barricades were holding kids far away from the sidewalk. Chuck swallowed. Pete's gonna be okay, right, Dad? Dad pulled into the side of the road, a block away from the emergency vehicles, and shut off the engine. He's going to be fine, but his voice sounded funny, like his throat was tight. His eyes looked scared and uncertain if he didn't believe his own words. Chuck rushed out of the car with his dad. They headed towards the flashing lights. A police officer held up his arms. Sorry, I can't let you go through. That's my son. I need to see him. My wife is there. Name? Dinglewood. My son's name is Pete Dinglewood. He's the one who was hit. The policeman nodded and let them in. They passed more emergency workers than Chuck could count, and a truck that was pulled to the side with a huge dent on the front of the bumper. Chuck gasped and hoped that the dent didn't come from hitting Pete. There was a man sitting on the curb talking to a police officer. He had his hat on his hands, and he was crying. Chuck glanced towards the middle of the street and froze when he saw Pete's shoe lying there. It was a plain white sneaker, making the blood splattered on it horribly noticeable. And all I could think was Pete needed his shoe. Little black numbers on plastic folded cards were scattered around the road, like for an investigation. Chuck swallowed hard and followed his dad until they finally spotted his mom standing by a gurney. Her back was to them and her shoulders were shaking. There's Mom! Chuck said, even though he was pretty sure Dad had already seen her. Dad rushed to her side and put his arm around her. Chuck held back, afraid to see Pete on that gurney. He pulled out his inhaler and took a puff before he got any closer. Behind the barricades, there were some other high school students. Some faces were in shock, other kids were crying, some kids had pirate costumes on. Pete probably loved that. The thought made Chuck's lips twitch, but he couldn't bring himself to smile. Chuck, Dad said, reaching out a hand. Come here, son. He was crying. He'd never seen his dad cry before. Chuck didn't want to move. He didn't want to walk to the gurney. If he could have, he would have gone in the opposite direction, but he forced a step forward, then another. He felt dazed and in slow motion, as if he was walking through heavy syrup. When he finally got to his dad and Mom, he moved between them for their support. Pete was laying on the gurney. His eyes were closed and he looked incredibly pale. The scratches from the fishing accident stood out like angry red lines on his face, and he had fresh scrapes etched into his forehead. Chuck waited for his eyes to open, waiting for him to move, blink, anything. He's gone, Chuck, Dad said through tears. His words made Mom cry even harder. A man in a white uniform shirt walked over to him. I'm sorry for your loss. We can meet you at the hospital when you are ready. Dad said, Yes, thank you. The man was wearing blue gloves. He grabbed the large canvas bag, and just like that, Pete was gone. Pete felt frozen, like he couldn't move any part of his body. But strangely, he didn't feel cold or hot or any pain. He was surrounded by darkness, and there were distant voices, sounds of movement. Hello? Where am I? He wondered. Weirdly, he couldn't move his lips. What the heck? It seemed like a long time had passed. Finally, he heard something like a zipping sound, then a bright light appeared around him. There was a man above him, wearing clear goggles, a blue cloth cap, a face mask covering his nose and mouth. Was he a doctor? Hey dude, you gotta help me. I feel weird. Pete figured he must be at the hospital. He'd been hurt by a truck, he remembered. He was trying to get to the pizza place, but he'd forgotten the rule his mom had always ingrained in him since he was little. To look both ways before crossing the street. Well, now he'd been fixed with some surgery, relief flooded over him. He'd get fixed up and then he and Chuck could face Foxy together. And then it would all be over. Finally. Another man appeared above Pete, looking down with sad eyes. Poor kid. So young. He said, "Yeah, I hate it when they're young like this. Really a shame. Gives me chills sometimes. Because of your own kids, right? Yeah. I'll be sure to give them an extra hug when I see them." Me too. The two men lifted Pete's body up onto a hard table. "Hey guys, for some reason I can't move. What's the matter with me? Did you give me something to numb me? This is kind of freaking me out. I've had a really bad week, you know. So please tell me everything's okay." A terrible thought dawned on Pete. Oh no. Did the truck hurt my legs? Will I be able to walk again? Is that why I can't feel them? Why won't you talk to me, guys? I need answers! I need help! One man put his gloved fingers above Pete's eyes. Weird. What? I can't close his eyelids. It's like they're frozen open. It's happened before. Yeah, but I don't like it. I want them closed. The other man laughed. Suck it up, Buttercup. We've got work to do. He picked up a handheld screen. One good thing. It says here the kid's an organ donor. Wait. What? Yeah, Podson were going to some lucky recipients. He's young. His organs are healthy. We've got to work fast, though. No! There's a mistake! I'm okay! I'm not ready to give up my organs! Mom! Dad! Where are you? Don't let him do this to me! The man grabbed large scissors and started to cut his clothes away. A few minutes later, music filled the room. Wait a minute. Is this another nightmare? Am I dreaming? Please let this be a bad dream. Let this not be real. Wake me up now. Wake up, Pete. Wake the hell up. You got plans tonight? Yeah, taking the kids to Freddy's. They love that place. My kids love that place too. Those animatronic things kind of freak me out, but the kids love them. Whatever makes them happy. Stop! I'm alive! You can't take my organs before I'm dead! Someone help me! Please! The first man grabbed a scalpel and placed its point onto Pete's chest. Oh. Hold up a minute. The other man said, reading again from the screen. What's up? Oh, thank goodness. Tell him this is all a mistake. Tell him I'm still alive. Tell him not to cut me open. We have an urgent case. In need of the eyes and one hand. It says here, this kid's an exact match. The hand doesn't have much damage. It'll work, but we've got to put everything on ice quickly. The transport will be here before we know it. Let's do that first. No! 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 The man with the scalpel looked down at Pete. Good job, kid. You're gonna help a lot of people. He retrieved small forceps with his other hand. The second man turned on a small buzzsaw, the blade spinning in a circular blur. Let's get to work. Pete began to hear Foxy's music play in his head. You can be a pirate, but first you'll have... Pete watched in helpless horror when the first man leaned down to take his eyes. 4 weeks later, Chuck rode his bike to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The clouds were heavy and dark, and there was a cold bite in the air. When he'd come home from school, no one was there, even though Chuck knew the house was empty. He still called out, "Hello? Pete?" The refrigerator answered back with a low hum. The house wasn't very big, but it seemed huge and empty to Chuck. He used to want to be old enough to stay home by himself. Now that he'd gotten his wish, he wished for company. Mom had finally been able to go back to work after weeks of crying. Dad was also at work. Somehow, the grief of losing Pete had reunited his parents, and Dad had moved back home after the funeral. One day, Chuck watched them clean up Pete's room. They picked up dirty clothes, threw away some garbage, made his bed and closed the door. It hadn't been opened since. Chuck hadn't met up with his friends in a while. He was supposed to be home doing his homework, but something had been driving him to go back. Back to Freddy's. Back to see Foxy. He'd never told anyone what he and Pete had really thought about Pete's freak accident, how they believed the trouble had started, or why they'd planned to meet at Freddy's to face Foxy once and for all. 4 weeks later, Chuck had felt heaviness on his chest, like he was supposed to do something that he never got to do, like he had a puzzle that was incomplete. He replayed Pete's last message over and over since the funeral. "Chuck, you were right. It's been Foxy all along. I have to go back to face him. Freaky stuff is still happening, but no way is Foxy going to win. Chuck, no freaking way. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, little bro. Meet me there as soon as you can. We can finish this together!" Pete's death nagged at Chuck day and night. Sometimes when he was sitting in class, the bell would ring and he'd realise the period was over before he'd noticed that it had started. He was falling behind in every subject. Teachers stared at him, but no one said much. They all knew he'd lost his brother. They all knew he'd changed. Chuck sat alone at lunch, writing in his notebook, filling it with notes, ideas and scenarios on what could have happened to Pete and how they could have stopped it all before Pete had gone. Well, no more what ifs. Chuck was wondering. He had locked his bike on the bike rack in front of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. When he stepped through the doors, the familiar scent of pepperoni wafted over him. The pings and musical game sounds vibrated around him. He walked through the arcade and saw a group of kids huddled around a game. That used to be him. He always loved the place, until that fateful day. When Pete dragged him down the corridor to the maintenance room, everything changed. He walked through the play area and over the birthday tables, and watched a couple of families sitting right in front of the stage. Everyone looked happy. The little kids were eating pizza, enthralled by the show of the animatronics. Some were singing with their mouths full. The kids clapped and cheered after the song was finished. Chuck walked towards the corridor that led to the maintenance room. He looked over his shoulder to see if anyone was watching. Then he slipped through. He walked slowly down the darkened hallway, past the old posters, until he reached the door. He reached out for the handle, and his hand shook. He took a breath, and pulled the heavy door open, stepping into the darkness. The door slammed at his back, the sound echoing in his ears. He pulled out his inhaler as his breaths thinned, and he took a puff. Then, he shoved his inhaler into his pocket and pulled his phone out, turning on the light. He went straight to the small stage, and straight to the open control box. No more waiting this time. No more wasting time. It's now or never. A shiver crawled down his back, but he ignored it. If he hesitated, he knew he wouldn't do it, and he'd been replaying this moment over and over in his head. He had to do it. He had to find out what happened to Pete. "This is for you, Pete," he said into the dark room. "I'll face the villain and beat the game." He braced himself and slammed down on the start button. He waited for the curtain to pull back, for Foxy to begin to sing. But nothing happened. All Chuck heard was complete silence. I do hope you enjoyed tonight's story, as our next story will be Coming Home, as read by Heather's Film Travels. And until then, take care everyone, and remember, it's now only 2 days until the party.